turning our attention to mass analyzers, which have the purpose of separating the ions that have been formed to detect each of the individual mass to charge ratios. There's three main ones that we'll cover in this course. The first of which is the magnetic sector, which is the oldest of the three different types, and probably the one that is least used now, but it's a good foundation for looking at how ions move and how we can control their movement by their mass to charge ratio. We'll have later videos for the quadrupole and the time of flight that show the basics of how those work. But for the magnetic sector, it's a pretty simple design. Okay, we have a curved path that we intend to force the ions through. And on either side of this ion path, we're actually going to put a magnet. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of draw this. Okay, we put a magnet on either side. So the field of the magnet is going to be perpendicular to the direction of travel. So our ions are going to come in up at the top, they're going to come out at the bottom, and so our magnetic field is going to be perpendicular to that travel. So we have our kind of magnetic field going across the field of travel. So magnetic field perpendicular to the direction of ion motion. All right, so what does this do? So it's going to ultimately result in this curved path. Again, because this magnet is going to be drawing the ions towards the inside. So if the magnetic field is going to kind of push them towards the inside, you can imagine that instead of going straight down, they're going to be pushed and have a curved motion. Now, if we have ions of different mass to charge ratios, and I'm just going to draw these as three different colored dots, we can see how having different mass to charge ratios is going to affect their travel. Now, if they all had the same mass to charge ratio, then the amount that this magnet deflects them or pushes them into this curved pathway would be the same. However, if you have a difference in mass to charge, you're going to end up seeing a difference in their movement. So let's look at how this works. If you have the exact right mass to charge ratio, you're going to ultimately try to get this to follow the nice curved path and again end up headed to our mass or our detector, right? We're already in the mass analyzer, so here we go to the detector. Okay. From the ionization source. And so ideally our analyte would have a nice curved pathway. This magnet would be pushing it to curve its pathway just right and make it to the detector. Now if your mass to charge ratio is too high, okay, it's too heavy, and so we don't get quite enough force from the magnet drawing it in to actually make this curve, and so instead of curving really nicely, it kind of goes straight too much, and so as it's going straight too much, it doesn't quite hit the curve. Okay, this one is too heavy or a high mass to charge ratio. Okay? It's not going to be pushed enough to make the curve. Additionally, if it's really light, if it's got a small mass to charge ratio, then it's going to be pushed an awful lot, and that force of the push is going to drive it to the wall on the other side. So it has a low mass to charge ratio and ends up hitting the wall. Now if they hit the wall, they're not going to make it out the path to the detector. So we get this kind of Goldilocks principle where only the ion of the right mass to charge ratio for our strength of magnet is going to make it out to the detector. We would use here what we would call a scanning magnet that adjusts your strength of the field so that we can change which mass to charge we're looking for at any given time. We can kind of scan from low masses to high masses and see a whole range of the magnet or of the mass to charge ratios reaching the detector for any given time. Now, some of the advantages of this is that can be really inexpensive. All you need is the scanning magnet, and you've got it, right? To build this magnetic sector. So it's very inexpensive. And this is really actually good for elemental analysis, where you might not need to separate out with really high resolution. But the disadvantage is that you can't get really good resolution. We can't control the magnetic field strength as easily in order to get very clear distinction between very similar mass to charge ratios. So getting down below nominal mass is not particularly possible, which is why this kind of is left for elemental analysis rather than for large molecules. This is also very unsuitable for large molecules, in part because of its low resolution, but also because of the size of the pathway that that's being utilized to head to the detector. All right, so this is the introduction to the magnetic sector, and I want you to kind of keep this idea in mind of having a stable pathway as you head into looking into the quadrupole, which also uses this idea of only just the right mass to charge ratio having a stable pathway to reach the detector.